Hi everybody, sorry about the brief technical delay, but welcome to the Prepare Your Firm for the Digital Tax Future webinar, brought to you by AccountingWEB and sponsored by Thomson Reuters. The aim of the webinar today is to review the results of the spring tax season survey, and also to look how the lessons learned during this period can be used to ease the transition to HMRC's new approach to making tax digital. So before we kind of run through the core bits of the session, just a little tiny bit of housekeeping. I'm Richard Sargent. I'm the director of Principal Point, and I am not John Stockdale, as you can probably tell from the lack of moustache. John unfortunately can't be with us today, so I've stepped into the breach, and hopefully we'll try and do him proud today. We're joined by three panelists. We're joined by Lucy Cohen of Mazuma, Alex Falcon-Huerta from Soaring Falcon, and from Mark Purdue from Thomson Reuters, and I'll get them to do a brief introduction in just a second. Final piece of housekeeping is that we would really appreciate any comments and questions that you have. And on your screen, just below where this is being streamed, you should see a chat box. And in there, if you'd like to type in any questions that you have, those will be fired through to us, and we'll try and pick them up either as we go along or at the end of the session. We'll hopefully be on live for about 45 minutes, so we're aiming to finish by noon. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. And to begin with, I'm going to ask Lucy from Mazuma, and I'm just going to pass you over to her. And Lucy, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Mazuma, and also, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just talk to us what your view is about the situation facing accountancy firms doing tax in 2016.
Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm one of the co-founders of Mazuma, and we're an accountancy firm that deals entirely remotely with small businesses, micro businesses all across the UK. We've also got offices in the USA and in Australia. I suppose my background on this and my experience of this comes from, we've been in the industry 10 years in the UK, so we've seen significant developments over those 10 years in terms of the increased digitalisation of tax from HMRC. And in terms of my thoughts on the future and kind of the talk around how things are progressing in accountancy, I fully embrace it. I think that it's a great thing that the industry is catching up and that we're becoming more modern, and I think it's a real opportunity for accountants out there to try something different and provide really good service for their clients.
Great, thank you for that, Lucy. I'm going to go straight over to Alex. So this is Alex Falcon-Huerta from Soaring Falcon. And Alex, could you, again, just do some intro to yourself and just where you think tax practitioners are in 2016?
Hi, so I'm Alex Falcon-Huerta. I'm the founder of Soaring Falcon Accountancy, and I set up my business a year ago now, so I've been trading since April 2015. My background really is I've got 20 years of practice experience. I took this opportunity to set up a business that is 100% digital, so I wanted to make sure that all my clients are online and they have real time. So the whole digital thing of HMRC, this obviously is going to work really well for me and my clients because I'm already ahead of the game in terms of making sure that they've got real-time data.
Great, thank you for that. And finally to Mark Purdue from Digita, Thomson Reuters. Mark, similar from you if you don't mind. I know some of our members might be aware of Thomson Reuters and Digita, but if you could just give us, again, the overview, and what, from a vendor's perspective, what do you think the main challenges are facing firms in 2016?
Hi, so my name is Mark Purdue. I'm the tax product manager for Thomson Reuters. A lot of people probably know us as the Digita brand, which is the brand of software we sell to the profession. And the biggest challenges that we can see coming up is, I mean, we're engaging very heavily with HMRC on the upcoming changes. There seems to be a lack of engagement from some of the profession, so I think there is a risk of this being a huge culture shock when it comes in what is effectively 2 years' time, which is when quarterly reporting and making tax digital is coming in. So I think between now and then it's the challenge of us not only engaging with HMRC, but making sure that our users and prospective users are in a position where they can start in the new world, let's call it, in a couple of years' time.
Great, thank you, Mark. So what we're just going to do now in the first of our sections is just to have a little review of some of the key findings from the 2016 review of how basically the membership have seen the recent tax season go. There's around 400 responses here, which is a good sample for us to make some comparisons of from years previous as well. So I think the biggest standout points really are, for me, is that 34% of the people who responded said that this year's season they would judge as being worse than last year, which is up considerably from the year before. Roughly 40% of the 40% of the audience also said that the majority of, 25 to 50% of their tax returns were completed in January. So people leaving it still consistently late. And really the biggest niggle from the audience by far, with 87%, is persistent, lazy, late clients, as it's classified. So getting the information from people in the last minute. I guess the simple question really to begin with, let's ask Lucy. Lucy, how do you think these findings match your experiences at Mazuma?
First of all, I'd say that I'm not surprised by those sorts of results. I mean, certainly for us, it's a slightly different situation as we've spent a lot of time implementing processes that chase clients throughout the year. So we spend a lot of time and energy chasing clients right from the 6th of April. In fact, we've already started getting tax returns done since the new tax year started this year, so we really get a start in it early. But what I would say is it doesn't surprise me that kind of what they're classified as the lazy and late clients, it's a problem across the industry, and I think it's something that accountants have to take responsibility for, and really push to educate and communicate with clients to get them to get their information in early. No one wants to sit there on the 31st of January filing tax returns at midnight. That's not fun.
Sure. So, I mean, we'll come back and we'll look at some of the kind of practical steps that people can take in just a second. But the fact that there has been an increase over the recent years in those kind of key metrics and the way that people feel that the survey that the tax season has gone, what do you think that's indicative of?
I think it's a combination of factors, really. I'd say that we live in a world nowadays where people very much expect things instantly. So we can order food instantly, we can watch whatever film we want on TV instantly, we can download media and stream programs and music instantly. So maybe that's starting to bleed over into professions where they think that if you just hand your paperwork in on the 25th of January, it'll get done instantly, and there's not necessarily an understanding that not all industries are set up like that, and there are some things in life that aren't that kind of instant result. I wonder whether that's kind of bled in as technology has improved, whether the processes in the industry haven't, and it's kind of leading into a mismatch of clients versus accountants.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. That's great insight. And Alex, perhaps we can kind of turn to you now and just ask similar kind of sets of questions, really. Well, what's your initial feedback on those figures that we've just talked about in terms of how people are feeling that the season has gone?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to Lucy, really. It doesn't surprise me that, clients are handing in their information later and later. And it is about educating the clients to just make sure that they do get their information in on time. But again, using like some of the technology that we've got available, that, they can have it real time, and that information can be sent in to eliminate some of the problems that we're actually having at the moment. I have worked in companies where at midnight I was, sitting at the desk and submitting tax returns, and that's something that I don't want to do in my business. So I just want to make sure that I'm implementing all the right processes to make sure that that doesn't happen. So again, similar to Lucy, we've already started the preparation of the tax returns for the 5th of April 2016, and just making sure that they're all up to date. I can get the information from my payroll system and from my real-time cloud accounting that I use. So it's just basically making sure that everybody's educated in how you want to run the business.
Great. And again, I think in a second we'll look at some of the practical ways in which we can that you've been handling this kind of a situation. But before we do, Mark, perhaps you could just pick up and comment on those figures as well, please.
Yeah, I mean, certainly they are backed up by the HMRC stats that we get to see on when tax returns are submitted. We get anonymised stats. So yeah, sort of across the industry, I think it's about 48% of SA100s are submitted in January. So that seems to agree entirely with what the survey is saying, that about 40% of people are saying that half of their returns are submitted in January. As I see it, there's two reasons why tax returns would only be going in January. That's either the client is inefficient or the practice is inefficient. And right. I'm going to guess that in the majority of cases it's a bit of both. Either the practice isn't chasing quick enough, or haven't got a strategy in place to get the information in, or the client is just inherently lazy, and regardless of what you do, they're not going to send the data in. Probably because what Lucy said is right. They live in an instant world and just expect, if I give it to you 2 days before it's due, that's fine. You'll get the work done. But yeah, that's certainly sort of my view.
And we've all picked up here about the role of educating clients, which is is an easy thing to say, but it seems to be something that comes back year after year. Now there will always be clients, I guess, that will drag their feet and will not be as compliant and work to timescales that you want. So when we think about how we're handling these clients, perhaps you can move on to some of the more practical strategies that you've employed to try and keep your season on track as much as possible. And maybe this time we can start with Alex. You seem to have consciously designed your practice to avoid this kind of situation happening. When you set up, what were the areas that you kind of really concentrated on?
So I just made sure, for instance, I implemented a work manager to make sure obviously everything was going to be submitted on time and by the deadlines. But equally, I implemented a lot of the cloud systems like Xero and Receipt Bank, where clients who are used to the digital world and want to do things instantly, they can take a picture or send that information straight into me. That then I have all the relevant information that I need. I can review it straight away, or within either every month or every quarter. So then I am then already prepared to be able to put that data onto the tax return or to prepare the year-end account. So I've just implemented all the systems and procedures as early as possible, just so that I can plan ahead. Yeah.
So some of it's to do with the way that your internal systems are set up. How do you go about communicating out to clients? How do you kind of have the education piece, shall we say?
So at the very, very early stages, I spend a lot of my time training them and advising them what the best way is in terms of the system that I use. So I use Xero, so I'll sit with them and make sure that they understand it fully. I then provide them with guides on if they do get stuck or if there's any questions that they have. I then follow that up with emails or with phone calls or with a regular meeting. So if there's anything there that they're not sure of, that we're always in contact. So eventually they sort of start to go off on their own and they feel quite comfortable with that.
Yeah, so just to be clear, some of it's actually for them to become very familiar and comfortable using the systems that you've actually set up.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
And in terms of some of your late payers, because I'm sure you must have 1 or 2 stragglers, what kind of carrots and sticks do you have at your disposal to keep things on track?
Well, to be honest, my business is a year old, so I haven't actually had any sort of late payers yet. I have come across that in the past. However, anybody that is going to, or any client that is going to want to do that or be late, I'm going to speak to them quite early on and sort of explain, the processes that we have to go through and just making sure that we do want to get it on time. But equally, with HMRC going digital, it is going to be quarterly, so we need to ensure that they're going to be comfortable with doing that.
Yeah, great, and we'll come on top of that in just a moment. So perhaps you could just move on and pick up with Lucy. So Lucy, the challenges here that seem to be outlined are ones of organising these late clients. How has Mazuma tackled that particular issue?
I'd say that this is it's always a challenge, and it's always something interesting. I think the key here is understanding your clients and your client base, and this a lot of the time comes down to human behavior. I think we kind of mitigate against this by very early on throughout the sales process and when people sign up with us, because we don't do any face-to-face meetings, so we have to rely on doing that all through communications remotely. Through the sales process and the sales channel and the sign-up process, we're kind of already whittling down whether they're going to be the right client for us or not. And if they're not really the right client for us, we're kind of quite upfront and saying, look, we don't think you're going to like the way that we work. We don't think you're going to like the fact that we're asking you for information early. We think you should go to maybe a more traditional firm. But obviously, that kind of stereotype of the more traditional firm is going to have to change as things become more digital. Yes. And so I think it comes down to understanding your clients. How do they respond to communications? What is the thing that makes them sit up and take notice? And then to track that and implement that into your workflows, and it all comes down to scheduling. So we have with our staff, obviously this will depend how many staff you have and the resource to do it, but all the staff have targets of certain percentage of tax returns to do by certain points throughout the year, and that starts off as early as the first target being hit in June, and kind of working strategically throughout the year so that completion should be before January. 100% should be before January. Yes. You'll always get late stragglers. I'm aware of one client that we have who never brings their stuff in until January because they're superstitious, and nothing we do will ever change that. There's nothing we can say. There's nothing we can say to them that's going to change that. But we understand that, we plan for it, and we work around it. And they also understand that if we have an influx of people who need their stuff done, they do run the risk of it being late. And I think the HMRC penalties are kind of in terms of that carrot stick thing you mentioned earlier. That's enough. You know, if your return's late, you'll get a penalty, and no one wants to pay £100 penalty, surely. So that's your punishment.
Well, so you're going to let HMRC wield the stick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Encourage clients to follow a process early and train them in terms of the system that you're using. And that's fine. So for those clients that are not necessarily very digital or not digitally inclined, what kind of challenges does that pose?
It raises a challenge because things like email or kind of automatic reminders and things like that maybe pass them by and they don't pay as much attention to them. But we also have in kind of safety nets in terms of as deadlines get closer and closer, we will pick up the phone and ring them and make that kind of real human contact with them as well. So we're kind of tying in both. We're using very highly systemized and complex digital systems in-house to be able to provide a less complex system to our clients if that's what they need.
Yes. Thank you for that. Mark, perhaps we could turn to you now. I mean, the practical side about the guys have just been talking about, obviously leading to us towards thinking about internal systems as well as how they're managing the client data collection side. What's your view on the approaches that have been talked about first, and maybe what's Digita's view on how a practice could and should be operating?
The process is sort of the flaw. If the client isn't efficient or the process isn't efficient, that's where it's going to fall down. So there's two streams. One is your client management and having a strategy to manage those clients. A small percentage of late clients you can work around, as Lucy says, but if the vast chunk of your client base don't send their information until November, December, that's not going to work when we go to making tax digital and quarterly reporting. That type of client, you've got to start educating now and getting back to where they should be. Regarding the process, we're certainly from our users, we're getting feedback that improvements to that process of getting information either from the client or to the client is really important. Things like portals, electronic improvement of forms, online storage, mobile apps where a client can take a picture of or forward by email a picture of a receipt. That is where you can improve the process and improve the efficiency to speed up that turnaround from the process at the moment is quite rigid, from the information being requested to the tax return going out. There's quite a few steps, but it's quite rigid. The quicker you can automate those steps and get from A to B, the better. So yeah, our role is very much in getting that process as smooth as possible, and helping you manage the clients as easily as you can.
In terms of, I mean, client management is, dominated the comments so far, and there's still a concern, and I can see from some of the comments coming through as well, still a concern about how we enable best service for clients who are either not prepared or not inclined to engage with us very digitally. And some of the process that you've just been talking about, Mark, like signatures and using portals, how do you think firms can still incorporate best practice in terms of internal efficiencies and cope with some of those slightly with clients who are not yet ready to come on the digital journey?
Let's take the tax return as an example. The process of getting the tax return to the client for agreement and getting that agreement back to the agent so they can submit it. At the moment, there's two ways you can do that. Either electronically, call it via a portal or email, or printing it off and putting it in an envelope. Those who aren't digitally inclined, agents probably have to take that former approach of printing it off and putting it in an envelope. Yep. Making tax digital, that paper form is not going to exist. What effectively the agent is going to be asking the client to review and agree is some form of statement of their income which is going to update their tax account. It's going to be very difficult to still incorporate some sort of paper process in that type of world. It will be possible, but if the main bulk of your clients are print off the tax return and post it to them, I think that type of practice is going to struggle with making tax digital. So I think at this stage, even though a lot of people are saying making tax digital is 2 years away, I don't have to worry about it until then, it's educating the clients on how you are going to be working in 2 years' time. Getting as many of your clients on board. You can still probably cope with a small percentage of the late payers and the people who aren't going to go digital, but it's educating those who just are too lazy or to either move or to take on board what you're saying, to educate them, to get them so that they're a client which you still want to act for, to be blunt.
Great, thank you for that. Lucy, can I just come back to you on that point then? So Mark's just raised some, from a vendor's perspective, just raised some interesting views on how we should be handling clients and what the future offers some of these clients. Is there any response you could make to that, or anything you can like to add to Mark's comment?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time in accountancy and in terms of things going digital, and I think it's a real point where we're at sort of at crossroads. You can't just stamp your feet and go, I don't like this, I'm not going to do it, because tough. And the same applies to clients. Basically, you can't, they can't say, well, I only want to sign things in paper form when everything's going to be submitted electronically. That's just not how the world's going. We've seen it happen, around things like VAT returns being submitted digitally, and then the staggered dates for filing self-assessment, and then RTI. So we've already seen this kind of starting to go in. It's just the next step, and I think it's a real opportunity for accountants to decide what sort of clients they want and what sort of clients they're going to work with, and use this as an opportunity to keep those that are willing to be educated and change and fall in line with the system so they get a better service, and ditch those that won't.
Fair enough.
to be really blunt.
Thanks for that. And Alex, can I just ask you, is there anything else you'd like to add to any of those comments before we move forward?
Yeah, so similar to what Lucy was saying, so it's just making sure that you're automating as much as possible and using user-friendly products so that people who are afraid of it, once they start using those products, they actually start to feel more comfortable. But it will just be also implementing things at a stage at a time, so you don't have to do everything at the same time. So you might want to just implement the bookkeeping side, for instance, and then later on start implementing a digital signature, so it's kind of paperless. So it's just implementing it a step at a time, rather than being overwhelmed with changing how clients do things straight away. So yeah.
Great, thank you for that. So I'm going to move on. Now to look at the basis of the Making Tax Digital. So we've examined now in some detail how we felt about the tax season just gone. We've looked at some of the strategies that we've employed to try and make that seasons it's handled better in terms of mainly around efficiencies of internal processes and also client data collection. So now, obviously, when we're doing that as an annual process, we can handle it in a certain kind of way. But when we move towards what's proposed and making tax digital, we may be looking at increasing that by 4 times. So as a starting point, perhaps I can first turn to Mark. And Mark, really the question to you really is, well, first of all, can you just bring us up to speed in where we are in terms of our understanding of what's being proposed? And then perhaps just have a little bit more of an open conversation about where we think some of the burden of administration, financial administration, some of the friction will come into play. So, Mark, could you pick up from there, please?
Sure. What I'll do is I'll start with what HMRC's end goal and then work back and head back towards. So by 2020, all taxpayers, there will be a few exceptions, will be dealing with their tax affairs digitally via their tax account. So that's HMRC's end goal. That's where they want to be in what is effectively 4 years from now. The first real milestone for the profession is April 2018. There's a lot of things going to happen by that date. The one that is hitting the press, which is upsetting most people, is quarterly reporting. I want to make the distinction. Quarterly reporting is a small subset of making tax digital. There's a lot of extra stuff going on. Yeah. So if I park quarterly reporting for a moment, because that's where all the challenges lie, particularly around client management. So by April 2018, the process that agents currently know as a self-assessment tax return will no longer exist for the vast bulk of their clients. The majority of data the agent will effectively source direct from HMRC, so all the employment, all the bookkeeping will come from the tax account or directly from your cloud bookkeeping software, depending on what type of setup you've got. But all the earnings, all the pensions, bank interest, all the investment income, there's a little bit of a question mark over dividends, that will already be held by HMRC before you start what an accountant would currently call their compliance process. So trying to think of it from that, you can see how massive a change is going to be happening in the next 2 years. Your current process is going to go out the window and be replaced by something new. That something new is going to be, in my mind, is going to be the agent interacting and becoming the gatekeeper of the tax account. So they're going to manage the tax account on behalf of the client. The client's going to be giving the ideally digital data to the agent, and the agent is going to manage that tax account. There'll be some sort of process around confirming that the client agrees with the content, and the agent will effectively send that confirmation on to HMRC. There will still be a process, probably annually, of the individual being responsible for confirming their tax account for that tax year is correct. So that role still exists for the agent. Where I think the real opportunities are, which I'll just briefly talk about, is the fact that the agent is now going to have access to near live data. Currently, your compliance process has very little value to you. You're doing a form, you receive a fee for it, but that data is historic, probably 9 months old. If the information is not coming in until December, January, it's already more than 9 months old. Managing a tax account now gives you the opportunity to actually manage it in year and offer in-year advice based on their tax affairs as they stand as at today, because HMRC are effectively already going to have that data. So that's how the process is going to change, and that's where software is going to enable agents to add real value.
So could you just before we're going to get some responses to that, just again clarify, what do you think the main difference is, just in a nutshell, on the process that firms will be following through the year as opposed to the end of the year?
So I would see that agents just before year end would be able to effectively review the tax account and get live information about their clients. So for example, they might suddenly become higher rate. That gives you the opportunity to suggest pension contributions, gift aid donations, simple things like that to mitigate that higher rate liability before we hit the year end. But throughout the year, the software that you're using should be able to interact with that tax account and notify you of any significant changes, for example. So if a client got a job, for example, rather than you finding out the January after the end of the tax year, your software will know as soon as HMRC know that there's a new job, there's new employment. Perhaps there's a planning opportunity around that. Perhaps there's an advisory opportunity around that. Yes. But there will still be a process, but the process of confirming the tax account will be a lot more straightforward. The tax account will be near complete. The agent will discuss it with the client, and the client will confirm they're happy with it, and the agent will accept that tax year in that tax account. So there is still a compliance process, but it is a lot simplified over where we are currently.
Right. I think, and again, just before I move to Lucy and Alex, you and I were having a brief discussion beforehand about different messages coming from HMRC. Now,
yes.
Again, so looking at some of the comments that are coming through as well, just to kind of summarize them, I would say that there is more than a degree of confusion and lack of clarity around what actually is going to happen, what isn't going to happen. Again, I know that you, as a business, are engaged directly with them on a vendor basis, but can you just kind of summarize what you think is likely, what you think is still very much up for debate? And
yeah. So yeah, the messaging that's coming out of HMRC, lack of clarity is a good turn of phrase. Depending on who you are and who you talk to at HMRC, if you're an accountant who's talking to your professional body, or you're the professional body talking to the agent, or you're an end client, or if you're a software developer, the person you engage with at HMRC is a different person. We engage on a one-to-one basis with the development team that are writing the software which is going to power this in 2018. So we have developers engaging with them nearly on a daily basis on what this information is going to look like and what data we're going to be able to access. So I think that's really important for software providers to be getting in at this early stage. It's understandable that the profession, and maybe the message the profession is getting, is all about quarterly reporting, because that's what the press are focusing on, quite rightly. The rest is, the message coming out of HMRC is making tax digital is going to be easy, don't worry about it. Whereas perhaps the reality of that is not the same. Certainly as a software vendor, we are getting good insight into how this mechanism is going to work. There's a little bit of a question mark over agent authorization at the moment, but that is good. That roadblock is going to be moved way before we get to going live with any solution.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So maybe I can just turn to Lucy. So Lucy, from your perspective, what does Making Tax Digital look like to you, and what do you think it will impose in terms of a burden for you as a firm, but also for your clients?
I think for us as a firm, actually, if you were to say it was going to go live tomorrow, that really wouldn't bother us. We're very much set up to we already offer our clients monthly reporting. They're already sending their information into us regularly because we've been educating them. But I think what it will do is things. I think there might be questions about adding value to clients. Some people may not recognise that, especially with the kind of historic way that you see an accountant once a year. We have a set of accounts, maybe is more static once a year. I think it offers really good opportunities for the profession to be tax planning, to be really getting involved in their clients' lives and businesses throughout the year, rather than just having that relationship once a year, which hopefully should increase client retention for people, because you're in their minds more often and you're interacting and engaging with them much more regularly. But in terms of, for us, in terms of Making Tax Digital, it's something that I hugely embrace, and I think it's quite an exciting development, and I'm kind of really interested to see how it's going to work in the real world.
And just on that, from a client's perspective, whose responsibility do you think it is to educate clients about what is happening, and also what their obligations are?
I think that the responsibility very much falls to accountants to tell clients what's happening. Again, I'm going to reference again the same as we did with RTI and other changes throughout the years in filing VAT online and stuff like that. I think that the responsibility does lie with the profession, but the responsibility to get that information on time and not incur penalties, that's an education for the clients, and that is their responsibility. It is their tax account. It does belong to them, and they are ultimately responsible for that. So I think it's a case of we have the responsibility to educate them about it, but that final sign-off and that final responsibility does lie with them. They do have a responsibility for their own tax affairs at the end of the day.
To what extent do you think clients will become more engaged with their financial affairs?
I think that, in two ways. First of all, they're going to have to be. If you're asking people to report quarterly, you have to be more engaged with it. I think for anybody who's done VAT returns or has to prepare things for maybe a mortgage application and stuff like that, it's not going to be a huge culture shift. But I think that actually overall clients will become more engaged, and after an initial kind of introductory period or initial kind of teething problems, I think most people will probably get on board with it and quite like it.
Now, I know you've said that you're a heavy digitalized business internally in terms of your own processes, but that's not true for all your clients, is it? So, will there be an impact on those clients as well, or do you think you'll be able to service both sets equally?
I know from our point of view, we're going to be able to service both sets. We don't require our clients to do everything digitally. We give them that option. For those that aren't digitally inclined, that's where our processes and our in-house stuff and our in-house software and bespoke software, and then using products and suites like Digita, help us to get their kind of raw physical paperwork into the digital world as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And that's going to be the challenge. There are going to be some people who are resistant and don't want to go digital, and I think that's where the interesting challenge lies, in getting their physical things into the internet as quickly as possible.
So, Alex, can we turn to you now as well, and maybe just ask, we'll just start back in the whole kind of, where do you stand on making tax digital in terms of its impact for clients and impact for your firm? Let's start there.
So it's really similar to Lucy's situation. Because I'm already digitalised, I'm not really going to have any issues as such, because everybody's already real time and I've already got that data to hand. So for me, it's almost like how we do VAT returns now is every quarter, so it's not really going to be much different to that. In terms of just making sure that people who aren't in the digital world, to transfer that the new systems over to them, again, it's just going to come down to educating them. The accountants out there who really aren't sure about it, it's about trialing and testing and just getting a feel for the systems and just making sure that you're happy before 2018, when it's actually going to hit the ground and you're not going to have a choice. So you've got 2 years to plan it carefully and to start making sure that you've got all the processes in place. So for me, it's not really going to be much of an issue. It's a matter of, we have to do it, so that's it.
And then, it's an interesting point, isn't it, about you've got 2 years to kind of get this in place. But what would be your first kind of few steps? Where would you recommend other firms start to explore in terms of what their approach might be? Yeah,
so I would consider the clients that are actually doing things manually or are using an accounting system already, and look at the cloud products that they have available to them. I mean, I use Xero, but there are obviously other products out there for them to use. So it's probably looking at that, transferring them over to the new cloud product. Things like products like Receipt Bank, for instance, where they can take photos and send things straight in. That's a really simple product to use. So I would probably start with smaller systems and then gradually, progress to other areas where I use Digita and Xero, so I know that they're partnering up. So for me, they're going to make my life that much easier because they're already planning that ahead of time.
Okay, so some of the software guys are going to be taking the lead and helping in many respects to lay down some of those kind of foundations for people to be able to adapt to their own specific circumstances. But now, in terms of the opportunities out there for firms, it doesn't take too much looking around Accounto at the moment, seeing the depth of feeling and, in a certain extent, anxiety around the impact on people's clients out there. But there must be, and I think this is already kind of started to talk about some of the opportunities out there in terms of tax planning. Mark said that too. Do you see any other kind of particular either advantages or opportunities for firms to start to exploit?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The real-time data to any client is going to be really crucial to their business. So to know what their tax bill is going to be, every quarter, rather than having it at the end of the year, is going to be helpful to any person. So for instance, if somebody's got they're going to be the high rate tax, which is what Mark said, they're going to want to know how much to then plan and save. So you can then plan in how, what percentage they need to be saving each month or each quarter. They can put that tax bill to the side, and then they've got it ready for whenever it's due. So there's huge opportunity if it goes digital.
Lucy, perhaps we could just pick up on that opportunity point with you again. I mean, you gave us a good starting point there in terms of the tax planning. Do you see any other kind of opportunities for firms here?
I think it's a real opportunity to level up with your clients, to provide a service and a form of communication and a channel, if you like, that is present in almost every other industry and service that they're probably going to use nowadays. I mean, if you just look at the prevalence of apps for something simple as ordering takeaway food, that wasn't a thing 5 years ago, really. But now that's all everyone does. It's just a case of being able to be on that same playing field as other kind of industry leaders, and actually things which were previously industry leaders and revolutionary, they're very much the norm now. You think about the number of people walking around with a smartphone in their pocket. It makes absolute sense to be able to take a photo and send it to your accountant. Why wouldn't an accountant want that to be able to happen? It seems counterintuitive not to be able to hook into that technology and use it to provide a great service to your clients.
I mean, that's an interesting thing about technology, isn't it? There were some surveys recently that were kind of indicating that certain groups of people have skipped PCs and moved straight to mobiles. So some of those people that we might see as being not as digitally engaged as others, through maybe just referring to their home or office setup, but even many tradespeople today have smartphones.
Yeah,
so some of the technology is there to help them.
Yeah, absolutely, and most kind of electronic documents, signature softwares and things like that work perfectly well on smartphones. I mean, to give you a really good example, my nan is 85 and she manages to sign her tax return on her iPhone. So I don't think it's impossible for people out there to get on board with it. She grew up in an era without computers at all, and she's managed to get on board with it because a lot of technology out there is user friendly and intuitive to use. So I think it's a real opportunity to harness that in the industry.
I can see your nan becoming the new poster child for HMRC campaign.
Yeah, she's busy off booking flights on her phone. She's all over it. She loves a digital boarding card.
Perfect. Mark, perhaps we can kind of come back to you on this point as well. Not necessarily your nan, but that kind of, we started to just kind of talk about opportunities that are out there, and try and shift the conversation away from just being about how we handle our clients and how we kind of bring them along this journey and what the extra opportunities are.
Yeah, I think the shift to dealing with live data, particularly tax data, you might already have cloud bookkeeping data, so you've already got an aspect of near live data. But actually bringing the tax data to near live, there are going to be so many opportunities. I gave a couple of simple examples to mitigate high rate tax. But I think a key point is that if you as a practice decide that you're not, or don't take an action so that you're not going to start offering these type of additional services, someone else is going to. And I think that's a key point that everyone should have at the back of the mind. They've got 2 years until this new system comes in, 2 years to educate client, and I think client education is important. But the type of live information is going to give real input into, even if it is simple tax planning or more complex tax planning, or in the future the capital gains transactions are going to be there. So suddenly finding out your clients sold some shares at a massive profit and that they've got unrealized losses in year, you can give them that advice to mitigate the gain before it's happened, before it's too late to do anything about it. Compliance process at the moment only gives you that information when it's sometimes too late to retrospectively act on.
I mean, it's quite interesting. There's a lot of discussion about the value of compliance and the drive towards value-added services or consultancy-based services. But actually, it seems to me there is a lot of value still within providing what have been quite traditional, in many ways, compliance-based or bookkeeping-type services. Do you see the future being bright for this kind of services, Mark?
Definitely. There's still a role for that type of service. I think that what a client expects that service to look like is going to be different. If you are currently doing management accounts which are sent once a quarter as a PDF that has got loads of numbers in black and white on it, that might not be the type of output that a client wants to see. They want to see projections that are nice, pretty graphs and that sort of thing. So there is still that need for that service, be it around bookkeeping or tax advice, but it's not necessarily going to look like the offering that maybe you currently give. I think things like cash flow forecasting, once we're dealing with live data, that could well just become part of your normal compliance process. It's not about taking bookkeeping data and generating what is effectively a dead set of accounts, your final accounts. It's about adding value along the way before you get to that point, giving advice on cash flow, other management reporting, and that type of data.
So Lucy, traditional accountancy is dead. Everything's become digital. There's no role for people like you in the world. Is that how it looks?
Oh, it's a brave new world. Obviously, I don't think that's true at all. I think that we've never been in kind of inverted commas in a traditional firm, but we have seen over the last 10 years things progress, and we've been very clued up and keen on always being kind of that step ahead of looking at what the future is going to hold and getting systems in place that deal with that. I mean, from when we very first set it up, it was all about doing things monthly and not just doing things once a year. I think just as time has gone on, it's become more and more apparent that is the way that things are going to go. And I'm just excited that we can keep developing our service and our products as what we do. I mean, we've just launched on the 6th of April our app for our clients, which allows them to interact with us that way. We're just going to keep developing, keep hopefully staying slightly ahead, but being able to keep up with the world as it becomes more digital. I don't think it's a reason for any accountant to be terrified of it. I think it's progress, and we have to get on board with it, really.
Great, thank you. And Alex, sounds like the good news for you is that after 12 months you've still got a business that's got a future to it.
Yes.
But in terms of what that future might look like, how does it seem from your seat at the moment?
Well, I'm obviously hoping that my decision in setting up my business and being 100% digital was the right one. And going on, being surrounded by technology companies and hearing about HMRC being, going digital by 2020, it literally has been about digitalizing everything. So I think people just need to be aware that it's not going away. People hate Facebook, but it's still there, and it's just one of those things that we're just going to have to adapt to. But using this real-time information, it does give us opportunities in terms of products out there are giving us a lot of data from real-time information, which means that we can start to see trends. It also means that we can look at different industries for our clients and then educate them perhaps on whether they're doing the right thing or going in the right direction with their business to help them grow. So I think it's very exciting times. Good,
great stuff. So we're going to just kind of draw things to just an end here, and I just want to summarize some of the main points I've made as we've gone through. Two standout things for me have been around the efficiency of client data collection and the different methodologies out there that need to be thought about carefully in terms of making sure that moving forward all your clients are serviced in the best possible way. The second thing is around making sure internal processes are as efficient as possible as well. So without the internal efficiency, servicing clients are going to become increasingly difficult. So I mean, those two things really stand out to me. The other thing is around about client education, and I'm still a little bit woolly about actually what we mean by client education, but perhaps the best definition I can muster is around making sure people are capable and confident in using the systems and operating the way that you'd like to work, as well as being aware of what their obligations are from a statutory perspective. And the other thing, again, which I've really kind of picked out is that there's a sense of gradual implementation being quite beneficial. We've got 2 years before a lot of this is going to become mandatory. And actually there's a journey, and we need to start thinking about that journey sooner rather than later, and thinking it from a strategic perspective as well as a practical operational perspective. The other thing which I've really learned is about Lucy's gram. and that's probably a memory I can take home from this session. So just before I go and ask a few questions that have come through, can I just ask each of you just to kind of say any kind of roundup comments or anything you'd like to add? And perhaps we can start with Alex.
So I think for the accountancy firms who aren't really keen on this whole digital system, it might be an idea to perhaps pick a key staff member who really wants to take this type of project on board, and you might find that they're the ones that are going to gear that the project into the right direction for you. Just implementing all the right tools and all the cloud products just to help you get up and running and started in the right direction.
Great, thank you. And Lucy?
I'd say it's well, I keep saying the word opportunity, but it's a real opportunity. Get the right clients, talk to your clients, understand your clients, and provide them with the tools. And hopefully, the transition should be fairly straightforward. There's always going to be teething problems, but it's quite an exciting time, and I'm kind of looking forward to it.
And Mark?
Yeah, just to agree, it's going to be an opportunity. It's going to be scary for a lot of people, but it is an opportunity to change how everyone currently works. It's an opportunity for software providers to come out with new software that helps agents, and it's an opportunity for agents to educate their clients and make themselves more efficient. Be more efficient, you make more money, to be blunt. So that's the opportunity in it.
Great. So thank you all very much for your time and input today. I'm just going to finish with a couple of questions that have come through. I've tried to incorporate some of these as we've gone through the session, but a couple here. I'm afraid, Mark, most of them seem to be aimed towards you.
Okay.
It's all your fault.
Okay, that's fine.
But one of the, some of these are very, very practical, and I guess are very detail driven. I'm just going to give you a flavour of them, and just so you can help here. So a comment from Katie. She says, I have heard some comments that agents will not be able to access their clients' digital tax accounts. Do you know for certain that agents will be able to access them and act as the gatekeeper?
Okay, so this comes back to a large extent, as I mentioned earlier. It depends who you ask at HMRC, depends on the response you get. At the moment, if you imagine that the tax account is the website that the individual logs into, there's two aspects to what we're talking about. One is the agent being able to log into a website to see those figures with HMRC. And the second aspect is their software that they currently use being able to access the underlying data. That's what we're working on, is that data that lives in API form, which is a little thing that allows software products to talk to each other. There's a question mark at the moment over when agents can access that data via APIs. When you speak to the HMRC developers, they are quite clear that they know that that in itself is a major issue going forward and is being resolved as we speak. There are people working on it, working out how it's going to work and etc. So currently the official HMRC stance is that agents can't currently access tax accounts, because tax accounts exist. Anyone listening to this can create their own tax account. But agents can't access those yet. By the time, certainly by 2018, but in all likelihood, we're expecting this to be more towards the end of this year, agents will indeed be able to access clients' tax accounts.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I know it's difficult to be extremely clear because some of this is still kind of live. Another interesting comment here from Ian, who is making some comments around the, should we say, teething issues still in existence around RTI. And whether or not the movement towards making tax digital is going to compound issues that are still yet to be sorted. And I know some of you others might have a view on this as well. Who would like to pick it up?
I can pick that one up.
Okay.
I think that in a kind of an interesting way, the teething problems with RTI are a good kind of starter for kind of preempting, communicating with clients about teething problems with other things, with potentially making tax digital. Anybody who's had experience of those teething problems with HMRC and RTI, it's not going to scare clients too much, I think, when those happen, because you can just say, well, look, you know this has happened before, we've sorted it out, it's fine, it's a work in progress, and we do expect things not to be perfect initially. So I think, again, it's another kind of, I keep saying the word opportunity, but another opportunity to have that good communication with your clients, going, look, we're working for you here, at least you're not dealing with this on your own, we're doing it for you. It's a good selling point.
Great. And thank you, everybody. I mean, there's a few more questions we could go through, but I think we've covered them in terms of theme through the session. So it just leaves me to say thank you to Mark Purdue from Thomson Reuters Digita. Thank you very much to Lucy Cohen from Mazuma, and of course from Alex Falcon-Huerta from Soaring Falcon. And there will be a white paper, a summary paper made available to people who have subscribed to the podcast, to this webinar, in the next week or so, and more details will come out through email from AccountingWEB. So thank you, everybody, and we'll look forward to seeing you again another time.